This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gido-Yuat. It's Wednesday, October 2nd. This is Africa 54.
Kenyan police kill suspected militants planning an attack in the coastal city of Mombasa. Will Tunisian women secure gender parity gains in the upcoming election? And we'll take a closer look at a smart apron that's like an extra set of hands in the kitchen.
Kenyan police say they have foiled a militant attack in the coastal city of Mombasa, killing the 3 men suspected of planning the assault. Matthew Larotonda has the details in this report.
Kenyan police say they've shot dead 3 men suspected of planning militant attacks in Mombasa. The suspects were killed in a raid on a house. That's according to Paul Letting, the director of criminal investigations in the coastal region. 7 other suspects were detained. A grenade and 1,700 rounds of ammunition were seized in the operation. Police also recovered 2 bulletproof jackets, police and military uniforms, and 8 machetes. Kenyan security services warned last month that al-Shabaab fighters in neighboring Somalia were planning attacks on the country, specifically targeting churches, universities, hospitals, and schools. It's unclear whether those detained are connected to al-Shabaab. The incident comes ahead of Kenya's National Day celebrations to be hosted in Mombasa this month.
Matthew Larotonda of Reuters with that report. Now to Mali, where the government says 25 of its soldiers are dead following suspected jihadist attacks on 2 of its army camps. Malian officials say Monday's attacks in central Mali are the worst suffered by its security forces this year as they continue to fight al-Qaeda and Islamic State-linked extremist groups. Insurgents have exploited local conflicts to prepare a number of operations in Mali, and from there they launch attacks across much of the Sahel. Mali conducts joint operations against the militants with Burkina Faso on a regular basis. In September, West African leaders pledged $1 billion to combat the growing threat of Islamic insurgencies. Women have made huge strides in Tunisian politics, since the country's 2011 Arab Spring Revolution. Now they're hoping to make further progress toward gender parity in legislative elections being held on October 6th. But building on or even sustaining the earlier gains may be a problem. Lisa Brand reports from Tunis.
It's hard to miss Samira Chouachi this election season. She appears widely in the media as spokesperson for the Heart of Tunisia party, headed by jailed presidential candidate Nabil Karoui. But Chouachi is also running her own race in Sunday's parliamentary vote, heading the party's Tunis area list. It's been a long road getting here.
There used to be a political quota for women before the revolution, but they weren't always the right ones for the job. Now it's much more about competence. You have to fight within your party to be a leader.
So we don't have any difficulty to find, of course, women, female candidates, but to let the parties put them as head of list, that's the fight.
Tunisian women have long enjoyed rights rarely seen elsewhere in the Arab world. They captured nearly half of all seats in last year's municipal elections, and they make up nearly 1/3 of Tunisia's current parliament, compared to just 1/5 in the U.S. Congress. One big reason, laws requiring parity in party lists. 2 women also ran for president this year. The capital, Tunis, has its first ever female mayor from the moderate Islamist Ennahda party. But women had less than 10% of Ennahda's list for these legislatives. There's no parity when it comes to ranking, and the party says it's hard to find good candidates.
We are unhappy, honestly, with the 10%. We'd like to do more, and hopefully in the future we'll do better.
Getting women out to vote is another challenge. Many are disappointed with post-revolution politics.
People are losing hope, and they are not so involved. They don't like to have another bad experience.
But Shawashi believes there's no going back. Tunisians are now comfortable electing women representatives, even if they may not yet be ready for a female head of state. Lisa Bryant for VOA News, Tunis.
Sudan's transitional government has signed an agreement with the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, establishing an office with access to all parts of the country. The regime of ousted former President Omar al-Bashir denied external observers access to areas controlled by his government. The African Union last month lifted its suspension of Sudan's membership in the bloc, ending a 3-month freeze that had been in place pending the installation of a civilian government. But more than a month after the power-sharing deal was signed, some Sudanese say not much has changed, while others are expressing optimism that brighter days are ahead. Now, for more on Sudan's political transition, I'm joined by Dr. Mohamed Naji Al-Assam, a Sudan pro-democracy activist and spokesperson for the Sudanese Professionals Association. Dr. Mohamed, welcome to VOA and to Africa 54.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Now, are you satisfied so far with the gains made by the transitional government?
Yes, we believe this is a major step in the process of changing things in Sudan. The process of change in Sudan will take a long time. We are speaking about a dictatorship that has ruled Sudan for 30 years, and it needs time to move things around and to put Sudan in the track of change, but it is going now, yeah.
A lot of people are very optimistic. It's only been 6 weeks since the transitional government was formed, and they've made a couple of strides, like we just mentioned, about opening a new UN Human Rights Office in Sudan. What are some of the key issues you expect them to accomplish in the next several weeks?
Yes, the opening of the Office of the High Commission of Human Rights itself is a huge step in ensuring the rights and the freedoms of the Sudanese people. And it was one of the major issues demanded by the armed rebel movements in Sudan. So now we have this office opened in Sudan, and we hope that it will work in ensuring the sustainability of the human rights status in Sudan, especially in the conflict areas like Darfur, Blue Nile and Nuba Mountains. And a lot of other issues are demanding, and the government should take care of, like making the reforms needed to put Sudan in the track of sustainable democracy expected after 3 years of the transition period.
Now, with regards to our former ousted President Omar al-Bashir's conviction with his co-accused, what do you expect to see in the trial?
Yeah, Omar al-Bashir now is in prison. He's in Kober prison. It is a central prison in Khartoum city. Alongside him is other members of the previous regime, more than 20 members of the previous regime and NCP. And now he is tried regarding cases of corruption, but other issues are rising as well. We are speaking about the issues of the genocide in Darfur, the wars in Blue Nile and Nuba Mountains, the torture of activists and the killing of thousands and thousands of Sudanese people. All these are waiting for Omar al-Bashir to be tried against.
Now, very briefly, what next for pro-democracy activists like you? Are you hoping to run for a political office soon?
No, we have now this 3 years, very challenging period in the history of Sudan. We are in the edge of transforming our country into a full democracy after 3 years, and we need to work very hard to ensure a very strong civil society which stands around the pillars and the concepts of change, which guards this change and stand strong for every challenge that definitely will face the transitional period.
Dr. Mohamed, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Mohamed Naji Al-Assam is spokesperson for the Sudanese Professionals Association. Now, the Africa America Institute is an organization focused on education and promoting exchanges between Africa and the United States. It held its annual gala in New York during the United Nations General Assembly. Cheikh Tiero attended the event and has this report.
The American Museum of Natural History in New York was a buzz with conversation about building new narrative and celebrating Africa's achievement at an event organized by the Africa America Institute on September 24.
To the extent that by exposing Africans to America, they are able, through education, through new possibilities for employment, to actually grow teaching Africa.
The Institute has offered 16,000 Africans scholarships and fellowships since its founding in 1953. It also provides trainings and networking opportunities with the aim of connecting Africans and Americans in order to break cultural barriers.
I feel uniquely positioned for that because although I'm American-born, my parents are Ghanaian. I feel very much close to the continent. I eat the food, I speak the language, I go back often, and so I want to make sure that even myself personally represent what it means to go back to the continent and to bridge that gap that will be easy to cross once people make their first trip to Africa.
In attendance was also Anne-Thérèse Ndong-Diatta, a recipient of Distinguished Alumni Award, who said events like this are all about building a bridge between two places with long-standing ties and often troubled history. Ndong-Diatta says educational exchange can elevate institutions on both continents.
For Africans in general, I believe this is what we're searching for. There is this thirst for learning, for knowledge. And some of our institutions need to really be able to be strengthened by institutions we have here. So other than bring our African brothers and sisters to the United States, it may be a good thing to look at it in the reverse way, where American institutions are twinned with African institutions. And I hope this would be the next phase of this partnership and the collaboration between African American Institute, the universities in America, and the universities in Africa.
African-American attendees Crystal Jackson agrees, and this year, she says, specifically marked a special place for her as it commemorates the sad anniversary of the date when Africans were first forced to leave their homeland to become slaves in America.
When you think about this year represents the 400th year when enslaved Africans arrived to the United States, I think it's a great opportunity for us to celebrate the contributions of the continent. And I think the only way to truly do that is to be connected to our roots. And so I'm happy to have the opportunity to connect the continent to the United States, to the African American community, and from Africans from the continent.
As a model and the first woman from Angola to win the Miss Universe title, Leila Lopez has supported charities including campaigning against HIV/AIDS and promoting education in her home country. She says those who have gained experience outside the continent should use their skills to give back.
So this is something that's something very empowering that they do for us Africans here in America. So I believe that, like, through all this this organization is doing here in America, we can actually lend our voices and, like, let the world know what Africans, like, what we in Africa need, you know, like, to make things better for our continent. Like, we're gaining better experience living here, living abroad. It doesn't matter whether we are in America or in Europe. I believe that the fact that we left Africa and we are able to get better education, better jobs, we can actually go back and give it back to our continent.
Sheikh Chiro, VOA News, New York.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, a kitchen apron gets smart. We'll be back.
I'm Sheikha Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
The lyrics could be French,
English,
Portuguese,
Bantu,
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African Beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. Louis Vuitton closed Paris Fashion Week with a vintage feel collection, as models strutted in A-line dresses with high collars and psychedelic prints. The catwalk was dominated by Art Nouveau color schemes, flare pants, and three-piece suits evoking the fashion game in the 1970s. Tailored blouses and slacks made for clean silhouettes, punctuated with sequin tops. Next up, soft but strong. Could these be the ultimate environmentally friendly wedding dresses? The top 3 gowns from this year's toilet paper wedding dress contest were a mix of intricate detail and innovative design. The contestants must use quilted northern toilet paper held together with glue. Glitter glue, tape, needle, and thread are also allowed, but no buttons, no bought zippers, and no Velcro. The winner received a $10,000 prize. And finally, this ultrasound unit works in tandem with a smartphone app. It's reportedly the first handheld whole-body ultrasound system, which makes medical imaging accessible and affordable. 1/2 to 2/3 of the world's population has no access to imaging, according to the World Health Organization. The IQ has a price tag of around $2,000, over 20 times cheaper than traditional machines. And that's what's trending today.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo confirmed Wednesday that he was also on the phone call between President Donald Trump and the Ukrainian president that is subject of a whistleblower complaint at the heart of a congressional impeachment inquiry. Pompeo describes in part the context of the phone conversation.
As for was I on the phone call, I was on the phone call. The phone call was in the context of, now I guess I've been the Secretary of State for coming on a year and a half. I know precisely what the American policy is with respect to Ukraine. It was about helping the Ukrainians to get graft out and corruption outside of their government, and to help now this new government in the Ukraine build a successful, thriving economy.
Previously, Pompeo said that he knew nothing about the whistleblower complaint, which alleges that President Trump was seeking foreign interference in the 2020 election by asking Ukraine to investigate Democratic U.S. presidential candidate Joe Biden and his son Hunter. Trump is criticizing the impeachment probe against him as, quote, a coup, insisting he did nothing wrong in his phone discussions with the Ukrainian president. 1 year after the murder of Washington Post columnist and U.S. resident Jamal Khashoggi, President Donald Trump remains a reliable ally of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. But many in the U.S. Congress are still pressing for changes in American policy towards Saudi Arabia until those responsible for the murder are held accountable. Here's VOA's diplomatic correspondent, Cindy Sain.
Jamal Khashoggi was killed and dismembered after he entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul by a Saudi team suspected to be acting on orders of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. 1 year later, his murder is being marked around the world with somber events, like this one last week in Washington, where 11 members of Congress took part. Since his death, the U.S. Congress has repeatedly clashed with President Donald Trump, voting to restrict U.S. arms sales to Saudi Arabia and to end U.S. military operations in the Saudi-led war in Yemen. Democratic Congressman Jim McGovern told VOA the president refuses to hold bin Salman accountable.
The bottom line is we should not be selling them weapons or providing them military assistance. That ought to be the consequence. And you see a bipartisan majority in the House and Senate that have been sending the president bills to limit certain weapon sales. The president has been vetoing these things.
Trump and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo have not wavered in their support for the Saudi royal family. The president has cited economic concerns for not damaging ties with Riyadh.
It's a very simple equation for me. I'm about make America great again, and I'm about America first.
I think Secretary Pompeo and President Trump have made their calculations with respect to Saudi Arabia, and so I think that is what we're seeing play out right now. We have a Saudi Arabia that has been very actively engaged in a conflict in Yemen, pretty much on a blank check from the United States.
Trump's personalization of U.S.-Saudi ties has not been helpful in dealing with the Khashoggi murder. Middle East expert Yasmin Farouk told VOA.
But the end result of it is that a strategic relationship between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia today really hinges on the personal decision of the President of the United States more than it hinges on an institutional assessment of the importance of this relationship for the U.S. national security interest and for the U.S. strategic interests in the Middle East.
As Saudi Arabia tries to open up to tourism and international investment, Farouk says the Khashoggi murder will taint the kingdom for many years to come. Cindy Sain, VOA News, the State Department.
Marking the one-year anniversary of the killing of Saudi dissident and Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi, a United Nations Special Rapporteur and Khashoggi's fiancée are both warning the international community only actions, not words, will send a message that no one can get away with murder. VOA's Ramon Taylor reports.
On October 2, 2018, prominent Saudi dissident and Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi, a U.S. resident, entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey, never to return. Audio recordings assessed by Turkish intelligence suggested Saudi agents had possibly injected a sedative and suffocated Khashoggi using a plastic bag before his body was dismembered. But calls for accountability at the top went unanswered.
What if this was done by another country? What would happen then?
In a recent interview with VOA, Turkish author Hatice Cengiz, Khashoggi's fiancée at the time of his disappearance, said she believes the U.S. and Saudi Arabia's existing oil and arms deals ultimately led to Khashoggi's case being ignored.
We need to send the message to the world that political and economic power in controlling vast energy sources shouldn't be enough to get away with murder. Many countries failed this test.
Special Rapporteur Agnes Kalamar, author of a UN report, determined in June that the state of Saudi Arabia was responsible for premeditated execution in Khashoggi's death and called for Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, among other high-level Saudi officials, to be investigated. In December, the U.S. Senate unanimously approved a resolution calling Salman responsible for the death of Khashoggi. But the president defended the Crown Prince, saying the U.S.-Saudi relationship was too lucrative to end.
They've been a terrific ally. They're creating millions of jobs in this country. With that being said, I'm extremely angry and unhappy about a thing like that taking place.
Just 10 days after the release of the UN report, leaders gathered at the 2019 G20 summit in Osaka, Japan, where some embraced Salman.
I took that exhibition of friendship for the Crown Prince as a slap in the face of the killing, of the findings of my report, and of all those around the world that are facing attacks for their independence of mind.
11 Saudi suspects are now standing trial. 5 of them could face the death penalty. But Kalamar says the Saudi trial, being held behind closed doors, fails to meet international standards. She has called for next year's G20 summit, scheduled to take place in Riyadh, to be relocated or otherwise replenish the legitimacy of Saudi Arabia. She and Cengiz warn that world leaders' actions or inactions may determine the fate of others, such as Khashoggi, in the months and years ahead.
Khashoggi was the kind of person that gave the U.S. the message, look, someone like this can also come from the Arab world. So the murder of such a person is like killing those who think like him.
Ramon Taylor, VOA News, New York.
It's time for our technology report, and joining us now to tell us about something new in the kitchen is our tech reporter, Paul Ndiho.
Hello, Esther. Hey. Online cooking videos come in handy, but using mobile devices in a kitchen can get messy. A New York University student has solved that problem by turning the traditional apron into a remote control. Tina Trin has more.
O is a novice when it comes to cooking, so she does what many do to improve their culinary skills. Watch online videos. But things tend to get messy.
It was annoying to touching my iPad frequently with my greasy hand.
O came up with a hands-free solution she calls the Recipe Controller. It's a smart apron prototype that lets users navigate online videos without touching them.
You can use this apron like remote controller to control your video contents while cooking.
The apron uses an Arduino microcontroller, a single-chip computer that has Bluetooth connectivity. Everything is connected, even the apron's print.
This looks like just normal print, but actually this is conductive fabric, so I program it.
The apron relies on soft circuitry, the use of alternative materials to create electrical circuits instead of traditional methods like wiring and soldering, making them easier to integrate into fabrics and wearables.
Sewing this print to the metal slab with the conductive thread, so it's connected each metal snap with each print.
Each print is programmed with a different function, and tapping them will pause and play videos or rewind and forward them. Need to raise the volume? Simply slide this pole left or right. The rope that it hangs on is conductive. O considered incorporating spoken commands, but the technology turns out to be less helpful in the kitchen.
Hey Alexa, Siri, pause the video is relatively long, but tapping is more simple.
For O, the best creations are equal parts design and tech. The electronic module detaches so that the apron can be thrown in the wash.
I want my apron looks like just normal apron.
It's a recipe with delicious results. Tina Trin, VOA News, New York.
That's today's technology report. Back to you, Esther.
Thank you, Paul. Be sure to join Paul Ndiho each Wednesday for another tech report on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a good evening.